Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Daily Bolt. I'm Dr. Jeff Tilley, and today in our episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the climatology of Halloween, because it is Halloween 2024 today. And a lot of people are always very interested in the weather forecast for Halloween because they're going out to Halloween parties, they're taking their kids trick-or-treating, or they're just sending their kids trick-or-treating if it's in a super safe neighborhood. And just doing all sorts of things outdoors that are on Halloween. Hay rides, bonfires, all sorts of things happen on Halloween. Lots of people want to know what is going to happen as far as the weather goes. Even football games happen on Halloween. There's a football game tonight on Thursday Night Football. I'm not going to worry about talking about that weather, but I am going to talk about a little bit about how Halloween is one of those holidays that you really have to pay attention to. It's not like the middle of summer where you can almost always count on it being warm enough that you don't have to wear a jacket in most of the continental United States, except maybe the highest elevations. And it's not like the winter in the northeast or northern tier of states where you can almost count on having to wear a jacket and it being cold, and often there being snow or rain or ice or all sorts of other things. You can plan for that. Halloween is kind of tricky because occurring sort of in the middle of the autumnal season, as far as the calendar goes, that starts late September and goes into late December. You get a part of the year where the weather changes rapidly, and often there are big swings in temperature, big swings in precipitation, and Halloween is no exception. I have experienced a lot of Halloweens where I've lived that it's been nice and warm and sunny. I've experienced Halloweens where it's been snowy, where it's been rainy, windy, even a tropical storm. So there's lots of different possibilities. And so we're going to take a little look at a couple of things related to climate that emphasize the fact that Halloween is a really tricky holiday to make assumptions about the climate. And I've got a bunch of figures that I want to share with you on today's podcast. Very first thing we're going to take a look at right now is a figure that shows the temperature from the 29th. That's 2 days ago. Maximum temperatures and how different those are from the 30-year average, 1991 to 2020. So we have maximum temperatures, minimum temperatures, and then the departures on the right-hand side of the screen. On the left-hand side of the screen, your maximum temperatures, they are in degrees C. So nice and warm in the center of the country where it's red. The color scale is actually pretty indicative of the temperature there. Maximum temperatures that are well up into the high 70s, low 80s. And very comfortable temperatures over the entire eastern half of the country, whereas the western half of the country is much cooler overall, especially over the Rockies, where some places didn't get very far above the freezing point for high temperature on Tuesday, 2 days ago. Minimum temperatures went below the freezing point in those same areas. In the center of the country, also still relatively mild. Temperatures at night didn't get much out of the low 70s to upper 60s. With bigger variations around it on both sides. And how do those compare to the 30-year averages? And that's what we usually use to talk about climate normals, 30-year average temperatures. We can talk about longer averages too. These figures will look significantly different in that respect. But we're going to stick with the 1991 to 2020 reference period for climate averages. So, maximum temperatures, much warmer than this 30-year average over the upper Midwest and going into the plains, the Ohio Valley, and down into the central and even southern plains to some degree. Much cooler than normal over the Rocky Mountain states, the West Coast, and the very high western high plains regions. Minimum temperatures show relatively similar patterns, although not quite the same spatial distribution because normals are different. They also vary with elevation. And in particular, we see a little less departure from the normal in terms of the low temperatures in the western half of the country. So that's just temperatures. That's this year. Now, let's take a look at what we had. Let's see if I can find that figure. Got a lot of different things on here. We have figures now from a year ago. And these are mean temperatures. There's a different color scale here. It's also in degrees Fahrenheit as opposed to Celsius. But the main story that I want to direct your attention to, and this was from last year, this is the one day mean temperature anomaly for October 29, 2023. Last year was much warmer than normal over the mid-Atlantic states and the southeast, and over parts of the Gulf Coast states, much colder than normal in the center of the country, the plain states, and going all the way into the Rocky Mountains, a little bit below normal along the California coast, and otherwise somewhat below normal over the other states that I didn't mention. So this is a different looking pattern than what we had last year. So year to year, there's a lot of variability in the weather patterns, and that's true in general in climate. And if you hear people getting all upset about, climate being, oh, it's so warm, you have to remember things are different from year to year, and there are changes. So you have to be a little careful how you interpret the data in that context. We can look at precipitation too. I have a number of precipitation plots here as well. We're going to start with this one. This one here, and as soon as my screen share thing disappears, I can see it. We're looking at last year. We're looking at these are two graphs that are broken down a little bit differently, but they show essentially the same information. In particular, they represent the percent of the average precipitation for the entire month of October. And this actually gives you a little bit of the representation over different periods of what you define as the average conditions, or sometimes called the normal conditions. The figure on the left uses this 1991 to 2020 base period. The figure on the right uses the entire 20th century. And there's not huge differences in what the patterns show. The figure on the left also breaks things down by counties, because we have that information where we don't have that for the entire 20th century. And the resolution of the data is a little different, but we still see that October 2023 was much drier than normal across Southern California, Southern Arizona, drier than normal across much of the West Coast, and across much of the Southeast Mid-Atlantic states, with a few exceptions. And wetter than normal in the northern plain states, going into the upper Midwest and the Ohio Valley and parts of Oklahoma and Texas. So that's what the percentage of average was for 2023. Now, we can say a little bit about where we are now. And so this is the 30-day accumulated precipitation percent of normal. Again, mostly the month of October. We're not all the way through October in terms of having the data, because we have to go through today for that. But we have the 30-day accumulated precipitation from the 30th of September through the 29th of October, and very different pattern. While October is normally a pretty dry month, it has been exceptionally dry across most of the continental United States. Few places that are considered to be excessively wet are the panhandle, not the panhandle, but the peninsula of Florida, which is where we had Hurricane Milton go through. You notice Hurricane Helene's result from last month is not included in this period because it was before this 30-day period started on the 30th of September. Otherwise, we'd see a much bigger area in the southeast with well above normal precipitation. Thankfully, the dry weather in the Carolinas and Georgia has helped with some of the cleanup efforts there, taking them a little bit, making it a little bit easier for them. The only places in the country this year that have been significantly wetter than normal have been in the Rockies, in particular southern Colorado, northern two-thirds of New Mexico, northern half of Arizona, most of Utah, parts of western Nevada, very tip of northeast California, and a little bit of southern Oregon. Otherwise, the rest of the country has been extremely dry. Again, a lot of change. And so just by comparing this year's pattern with last year's pattern, you can see just how variable the weather on Halloween can be from one part of the country to another. Now, there's other things we could do. We could take a longer look at this. But as always, I want to try and keep these podcasts relatively short so that you get some good information, but you don't feel like you have to sit here for an hour to get to the good stuff. So as you're going out tonight, take one last look at the weather. Make sure that you're prepared, whether it be rain, whether it be wind, whether it be that it's going to be really warm and your kids' costumes might actually have them be super, super warm, so you might want to have some extra water. That's just a little look at Halloween climatology for today's Daily Bolt. We will be talking about weather apps on the next episode, which hopefully will not be a week from this episode like this one turned out to be from last week's. We're going to get our frequency up there. Stay tuned, and I hope you'll stay with me. For now, this is the Daily Bolt. I'm Dr. Jeff Tilley. Have a great Halloween.